Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everybody. Welcome to our first live panel after Ramadan. We had a few of these during Ramadan, and yeah, alhamdulillah, we're now bringing our next live video back. So let's just give people a couple of minutes to jump on and view the video, and then we'll start, inshallah. I'll introduce our special guests for today.
And that's not me, huh?
We've got at least one special guest today, alhamdulillah. So let's just give people a couple of minutes and then we'll get started, inshallah. All right, I can see we've got a few people on. So let's get started. Bismillah, salatu salam, rasulullah. So brothers and sisters, this week is the Refugee Week 2020. And it's a week that world over people are increasing awareness of the plight that refugees and asylum seekers around the world are going through. And as we know, this is a big issue within the Muslim community of the lack of awareness. And, we do know and we talk about a lot about the issues in Muslim countries, but little do we know about the plight of refugees around the world, let alone in Australia. So today, NZF is organizing this live panel session, and we've got Nasiba Akram, who's the founder of the Project Humanity and the community engagement lead at Host International, joining us. Sister Nasiba herself arrived in Australia in the late 70s as a refugee, and apart from the fact that she stepped up, took control of her life, navigated the system, and is able to stand up on her own 2 feet. What she has tirelessly dedicated her life to is advocating the need of refugees. And she'll be joining us today, inshallah, to share her story, and more importantly, show us as a community what our responsibilities are in the space of refugees. We've also got Abu Munir Ismail Davids, whom I'm hoping most of you should know by now, the CEO of National Zakah Foundation Australia. And I've just got Asif Mulla as well. I'm adding him on to this stream. Assalamu alaikum, brother Asif. He's the Chief Operating Officer of National Zakah Foundation. And what together we want to try and achieve today is an understanding of the situation that refugees go through, balanced with what is NZF doing in Australia to help assist refugees, and then collectively as a community, what can we do to understand and better support our brothers and sisters who are asylum seekers and refugees in Australia. So with that, let's get started. Just before we do start, a little bit of housekeeping. If anyone has any questions at all, feel free to ask us in comments, and I'll bring it up and we can get either Sister Nasiba, Brother Abu Munir, or Brother Asif to answer. So feel free to ask us any questions. It's meant to be an interactive session, so it's not a lecture or a talk, and the whole idea is to really engage with all of you who've tuned in to watch. So Jazakallah khair for taking the time. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Sister Nasiba. So Sister Nasiba, I don't know much about your story apart from what Brother Asif told me, but he's told me it's a fascinating story. So if you could share with us what it was like when you came to Australia in the late 70s, not just as a refugee, but as a Muslim refugee. What support services existed, and what was your journey like? And we can start from there and see how we go, inshallah.
Sure, thank you for the opportunity. And I am pleased to be on board this panel discussion, which is going to be important not only for the community that we are living with, but the broader community as well can listen to us and have a say about this. Yeah, my life journey started in 1978 with the Russian occupation of my country, Afghanistan. I reached Australia in May 1979 as a first Afghan asylum seeker, but with one difference, that I already had approved UNHCR refugee status that I brought with me. But I came on a visitor's visa because I knew that I couldn't survive waiting to be approved by the Australian immigration and then move on. So I came with a visitor's visa. And when I arrived here, I was familiar with the country because I studied in Australia for over 2 years. Prior to that, I was on a scholarship studying here. There was no support services available for refugees when I arrived. There was no mosque apart from the first mosque that was available and built by the Afghans in 1861 in Adelaide. There was no worship place at all. I used to go to the town hall church, sat in a corner and do my prayer on my way to the university. That was the only thing available for us. The migrant assistance services, or the MRC, started a year before my arrival, but that was not for asylum seekers or refugees. The only available service that was there was a radio called 2EA. That was broadcasting for the newly emerging communities in different languages. That became SBS in the 80s. So what I did was I started a part-time job with them, broadcasting in two languages, Dari and Pashto, for the Afghan community members who were running away from the war zone. And I was able to give them some information that I could get through the radio and pass it on to the community. So that's what Australia was like when I arrived.
So that's very interesting. I mean, this things that we take for granted, and things like masjids, right? And the fact that simple things like that that are a central support structure that we take for granted in our community. Subhanallah. I mean, what I'm interested in is maybe how has that changed in the last 40 years? You would expect that you've got a whole breadth of support services for refugees today in Australia, and you kind of touched touched on the topic of being a Muslim refugee. How do you think, in your view, that's changed today? Is it better to refugees, Muslim refugees in particular, but refugees in general, when they are in Australia today? Do they have better support services?
To be honest with you, I think my judgment is that yes, Australia has widely opened their arms to receive refugees and gave them the chance to practice their own religion, to practice their own language, to value their ethnicity. The first time I was able to receive advice from the Australian Authority when I was receiving my citizenship in the ceremony was a priest. It was not done by the political leaders of the country. That citizenship was handed over by a priest, and the first thing that I heard from him was value your ethnicity, value your religion, value your language, and accept Australian culture in a way that is acceptable to you. But you need to be able to speak the language to be able to understand and communicate with the Australian community.
And if I can just jump in there, Farouk, can you hear me?
Of course, yeah, we can.
Yeah, yeah, and just listening to Nasiba there talk about her experiences, 40 years ago. Alhamdulillah, we started National Zakat Foundation 7 years ago, and one of our motivations for starting, launching National Zakat Foundation was that we believe that there's a lot of individuals in the community doing a lot of work, looking after refugees, asylum seekers, Muslim refugees, Muslim asylum seekers, but we didn't seem to have any kind of organizational response, or at least even at a national or a collective level. And that's been one of the motivations for us to establish the National Zakat Foundation, and saying, that there is a gap, that there is a need, that when, as Sister Nasiba explained, she came here, hardly any Muslim support services. Alhamdulillah, in the last 40 years, I think we've got a lot of Muslim support services established. But new migrants, when they come, refugees, when they come, it's hard to connect. And that's been one of our motivations to say, look, let's make sure from a community perspective, refugees feel that there is somebody, some organization there on behalf of all of us, to provide some support, either financial support or moral support, or just referrals to other agencies, other support services. So that's been our experience in the last 7 years, and been one of our motivations is to improve the support services of Muslim refugees as they come and settle in Australia. And working with people like Sister Nasiba, who have that deep knowledge and experience in this area, who have the connections, who have the understanding of the challenges that Sister Nasiba, faced when she came. And maybe Sister Nasiba, you can maybe lead us to what you are doing now and what you are seeing now, what refugees are facing, which we as a community may not be aware of. Maybe do you want to share some insights into that?
Sure. Let me go back a little. When I arrived here as a refugee with my son and my husband, soon after I put my feet onto the ground, I looked back. Of course, family members were my first responsibility. Later on, I started with sponsoring the people who were in the camps, displaced people. And through this journey of bringing people over, I've familiarized myself with the services available. But what it is, it's the responsibility of these services facing the initial but very important stage of their settlement, the settlement of the refugees in the asylum seeker, is that they will have to do the groundwork right. Ticking boxes is not going to take us anywhere. We need to work with professional social workers who are compassionate towards the issue of refugees, specifically the ones other than their own religious, lingual, and cultural background. They need to understand that, and do not leave the rest of the job for the other organization to take over. So the services available today are a lot. The initial settlement base is one. Migrant resource centers are the second stage of the settlement. But during this period, connections made or referrals made, when we say, is the refugee or the asylum seeker connected to a mosque if they are Muslim, connected to a church if they are a Christian or any other religion, connected to a synagogue if they are Jewish? This is the basic question for these settlement services. And this is when I say they should not be ticking boxes. They should be attending to this with care.
Sister Nasiba, can I ask you if you can clarify, or just for the audience, the difference between refugee and asylum seeker?
Sure. Generally speaking, a displaced person who has been forced to cross national boundaries, that means leaving their own countries, and who cannot return home safe, this person can be called an asylum seeker. So this stage will live until it is approved or granted the refugee status by the contracting states or by the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. So the asylum seeker will stay an asylum seeker and submit their request formally for protection to the place where they fled to. And once it is approved by the contracting state, based on their application, if it is approved, they will go to the next stage of being a refugee. Otherwise, if it is rejected, they will have to leave the country. And while they are in the middle of these two stages, they are asylum seekers, while their application has been assessed.
So you're basically going from asylum. You can go from asylum seeker, then to refugee, and then to a normal citizen, so to speak. Once your visa, your refugee status is, and if you accepted as a refugee, or you're going from asylum seeker, and your visa status have changed. Now,
Yes.
when does it change going from refugee to, sorry for the term, but a normal Australian citizen or a permanent resident?
It will change once the assessment is completed. So I believe that the number of the applications submitted has been so very many that it has been years for some of them while they're waiting, and their case is still under assessment and their condition is unknown.
So once they've been approved as,
so once they get approved, then they will go to the next stage of being offered probably the refugee status or any other norm of type of visa for remaining in the country. Then they can go to being a resident or a permanent resident, and from there they will have to wait another 4 years to apply for citizenship.
So in your experience in the work that you,
sorry, Ismail, go.
Do your experience in the work that you're doing, do you find that the Australians in general, for those who are permanent residents or citizens, appreciate the difficulties that what it's been to be a refugee, or like the feeling that everybody thinks possibly that the refugees just jumped off the boat yesterday, and they stay here illegally, they shouldn't be here, they're taking our jobs, they're just going to be on welfare. Do you find that that's still a common feeling amongst the general populace?
I don't think so. I'm working with many community organizations that they are not for profit. I'm connected to the group of the Australians who are working on this refugee support cause with us. That is not the general view of the Australians that I have seen or witnessed towards asylum seekers or refugees. I very much think that the general Australian population are very passionate towards this cause. They have been helping, specifically me with my experience. I get a lot of help from them, but it would be the political side, the government and their decisions, that they will have to make a decision of, yes, some of them are living in limbo for years and they have no support. If organizations such as National Zakat Foundation, Host International, and a few others that are supported by the community and they don't get government funding on this were not there, those people will, of course, die of hunger because some of them has no work rights even.
Asif, sorry, you were going to ask a question?
Yeah, this is probably a good time to answer one of the audience members' question. Enza asked, are you doing anything for the refugees and asylum seekers in detention centers? There are 400 of them at the moment. Enza, right now, we tend to work more with refugees and asylum seekers in the community. We do hope to start reaching into the detention centers where we can, and this is where we'll be working with partners like Sister Nasiba and her organization and other organizations that have reach into detention centers. But at the moment, our focus is on refugees and asylum seekers in the community who either apply directly to us for assistance or are referred to either by community members or organizations for assistance. So I hope that answers your question. And regarding assistance, I mean, alhamdulillah, the community is supporting us quite a bit, year on year, continuing to give their zakat to us, which a good portion of that is spent on assisting asylum seekers and refugees. And as Nasiba touched there, that a lot of them don't have work rights. It's virtually impossible to survive without work rights, and we try to help as much as we can. So I hope I've answered your question there, Enza.
Can I just ask
if I can bring up one more question?
Farouk, before you do that, I just want to add to Asif's question for Enza. If you know of any services or help that we can provide, Enza, reach out to us and let's see if there's something we can do now to assist in the. I know a few years ago when I was with another organization, we did do a lot of work in the detention centers, providing food to some of the detainees, and then the government stopped us from going into the detention centers. So I don't know if anything's changed since then, but do reach out to us and we can have a chat about that.
So I think as a follow-up to that discussion, there's a question from Shabir. As an asylum seeker, finding jobs is a problem, even if we are qualified or experienced, but due to not citizenship, we can't get a job. Is there any help from the National Zakat Foundation to help us?
Look, on that one again, Moise, we try to work with other organizations because we have to be careful we don't try and do too much. So there are organizations out there that assist in job seeking, and we try to work with them and not try and take on that role as well as our primary role, which is raising awareness of zakat and collecting zakat and then distributing that zakat. So we certainly help people who are, refugees, asylum seekers who've asked for course fees for training, so improve their work rights, get licenses for security licenses or traffic controller licenses so they can get jobs. So we certainly help in that way, but actually do as an employment agency or that type of service, unfortunately, we can't do that at the moment, and we try to encourage others in the community to fill that gap, and we would be happy to partner with them as much as we can. So I hope I've answered your question, Shabir.
So just back to my question to you earlier, Sister Nasiba. So for the general audience to understand, if you don't have PR or citizenship, that's understood. So if you're an asylum seeker, like Shabir is asking, what visa status do you need to be on to be able to try and find a job, so to speak? Or can all asylum seekers apply for jobs?
Majority of the asylum seekers have work rights, so they can look for a job. But the problem is that agencies such as Centrelink or other agencies will not be able to support their application for a job. So this is where I think organizations such as us and yours can get together to find a streamline where we can train them and make them job ready and help them with their future, because the government services are not assisting with
So do you find
asylum seekers with job finding.
So would you find then if companies also would not hire an asylum seeker simply because it's not permanent, so to speak, right? So maybe get the best qualified person, and his asylum application may get rejected, so they spend time hiring him, training him up, and then he has to go. Do you find that, or do we have to work in that space as well? Or
not with my experience, but there would be some organization would have that worry, obviously. But the best place for these displaced people while they are waiting and they have expenses to cover in main cities would be to be referred to the regional areas where they can have less inexpensive, better chances for a job. But here, I don't have that experience to share with you for what is waiting for them with big companies, because I haven't experienced that at all.
So just to finish up on that, to make it clear, if an asylum seeker gets a job, say at a particular company or place, and then their visa is still getting processed, and once their visa is rejected for some reason, then they lose their job, they lose everything, right?
Yes. Unfortunately, if that visa application is rejected, they are left with nothing. They have no future. Remember that they cannot return to their war-torn countries. They have no support from the government here. They have no future. And I have seen asylum seekers committing suicide.
So in your understanding, how many people would you think today is in that particular category? Do you know the numbers?
Within the workload of above 200 that I have been through in the last 2 years, I have seen 3 cases that their application is rejected. They're not getting any support, any medical support, nothing at all. And they're just left without any support at all.
Does it become illegal for an organization to assist people on that category? Do you know?
I don't think so.
All right.
Support organizations based on the community, those are working in a community support organization. There is nothing illegal to assist a human being, to provide them with initial life needs like medication, like food, like a shelter. No, that is allowed.
Yeah. Look, Nasiba, you mentioned some things there about job prospects, employment prospects, better living conditions, and maybe this might be a good time to have a discussion about what are aspirations for the future, or what kind of society are we looking at, what kind of services are we looking at. And one thing that we, in the last 5 to 7 years, we've primarily concentrated on emergency relief. So people not having food or not having money for rent or not having money for a train ticket or any, these are kind of really basic needs, emergency, what we call emergency relief. Um, you know, Partnering with people like yourselves, Nasiba, our kind of ambition now is in more transformational assistance, where we're moving on from the emergency things right now, what I need food right now, to looking for solutions about employment prospects, improving employment prospects. uh, you mentioned there regions. I think this is an area we hope to work with you in exploring that. Is what are the barriers for Muslims to move into regional areas, and maybe can we help remove those barriers and allow, give that as an option, rather than everyone coming into the major capital cities. You've got experience in that, you've got knowledge in that space. So this is some of the areas that we're looking at developing now going forward, as in more transformational work. That's working directly with refugees and asylum seekers, but also with forums like this, and with people working in a space that used to work in Nasiba. What we want to really do now is also raise a wider awareness of asylum seekers, refugees. What is our, the way we are raising the profile of zakat, we want to raise the profile of refugees and asylum seekers in Islam. What is the Islamic position on refugees and asylum seekers? I mean, people might realize this or may not realize this, that our greatest generation, from the Prophet ﷺ to the Sahabas, were
Yeah.
all refugees. They were
Yes.
all asylum seekers.
Yes.
So through this, we hope to see more and more of our young people at the forefront of fighting for refugee rights in Australia, because this is part and parcel of our deen and our background. Our Sahabas, before Medina, they migrated. There were asylum seekers who went to Abyssinia. So we have
Yes.
great tradition in this.
Yes.
How did they live when they went to Abyssinia? We lived in Abyssinia as a minority in a non-Muslim majority country. So
Yes.
how did they live there? How did they get accepted there? How did they assimilate? Did they lose their religion, or did they stick? Did they hold on to their religion? And Abyssinia is probably a better example for us in Australia, in the United Kingdom, where we are a minority living in a non-Muslim majority. But
Yes.
the Muslims flourished in Abyssinia. They were welcomed. They were respected. So these are the things that we hope to kind of work with people like yourself to raise awareness in our community, to say these are some of the aspirations we should have, that we are not looked at as the other, that we are looked at as a valuable part of society. Yeah.
Brother Asif, let me put my view on those two issues uh, into two areas. Number one, I cannot see any barriers, any religious barriers, for our community to move to the regional areas. The only issue would be that, yes, our community, our Muslim community, brothers and sisters, are connected to our mosques. They love the prayer sessions. They love the gathering. They love the connection. But if we provide a mosque in a regional area where they can gather in stone, where an imam could lead the prayers for them, I am quite sure that there will be no such barriers. Number two, as a community, I do believe in the strength of the community. Their power is above any government. If the community make a decision, and if the community support this decision, I'm quite sure it is going to be a very strong movement towards a better future, towards a better goal for their future. So I would like to ask my Muslim brothers and sisters to open the history book of Islam and look at the journey of our beloved Prophet, peace be upon him, in his followers and companions, doing the hijrah from Mecca to Medina. And I am asking my fellow brothers and sisters in Islam to learn and follow the footsteps of the people of Medina, looking after them. It's in their hands to put a few drops of a remedy, which is hope. Roll up their slaves to see and face the asylum seekers, no matter where they're coming from, and deal with them with a passionate heart, with a hope for a gift from God for what we are doing for them at the moment. And they need to be very careful not to step on their dignity. So it is our duty as a community, as a religious group, as members of this community, to have an open approach to the issues of the asylum seekers and refugees.
Jazakallah khair. Very, very insightful there. Do you feel that there's still a lot of work to be done in just the image from the media, because the media, I mean, many times the media makes it look like these are just people coming in here illegally, etc., etc. How can we work towards improving the way the media represents this particular issue?
Well, that is a good question, Brother Ismail, is that the media should focus on what is going on in their lives within their own countries. Who would like to close the door on a place where they're raised, where their fathers and grandfathers and forefathers has lived, not for the sake of an extra dollar? I don't think that anyone would make such sacrifice for the sake of an income. The war-torn countries are under pressure, and the best answer I could provide for you is that this question was asked of a client of mine, that why did you have to take this dangerous journey to get here? The answer was, death was facing me every day. Death was facing my family every day. Suicide bombing, airplane bomb drops, internal miss and fight within the country itself. I wasn't safe opening the door, going to work in the morning, and I wasn't safe coming back home. I needed to take this dangerous journey, and I said to myself, I'll face death once and for all, not every day, not every single moment. So in actual facts, it is our duty to familiarize the media with the actual facts within the war zone. If they're going to close their eyes or do not bring the real story to the community, they are making a mistake.
Yeah, I mean, just listening to that, Sister Nasiba, is amazing. And if you're saying that people are saying facing death and every day, and then they come to Australia to run away from that, and
Yes.
then we destroy their dignity and they commit
Yes.
suicide.
Yes.
So they die not from war, but they die from the dignity, lack of dignity. So as you
Yes.
said, it's important for us to work in this space to understand the background of these things, to appreciate the difficulties these people have come through, and to
Yes.
deal with them with honor and dignity, and understand the pressures they're under. And I think it's very, very important, like anything in this welfare space, is often one of the things we as NZF, we try to provide a compassionate service and not to be judgmental. And we all have our nuances of what we like, what we don't like. But once we understand, we often say you don't have to always agree, but if you understand, you may accept it. So it's important for us to as a lesson learned tonight for me, especially as well, and for my team, anybody watching, that we need to appreciate the things we have, and sharing gives us just more. So the issue of refugees and asylum seekers is one of the main things we are strategizing, working on, and improving on for the coming year, inshallah.
I very much hope so. And I need the unity of organizations such as yours, National Zakat Foundation, Host International, in many others, to make a strategic plan together, moving forward with steps that could help these individuals to rebuild a life with dignity and an achievement or satisfaction for us that we have completed our duty towards them.
Yes, I think it's imperative on us to do that, especially in the current things that we're working on. An example now with the temporary visa holders in the COVID stuff, where the New South Wales government just released $6 million for temporary visa holders for help, but nobody knows where or which organization is eligible, where it can go. So the more organizations such as us and yourselves, the Jesuit group that's reaching out to us as well, if we can show that we can work together and collaborate, I think we need to show the government that it's not only the big organizations that can deal with this. Because I was just listening to the radio yesterday, and they were complaining about the bushfires. And I mean, in the bushfire collection, there was what 100 million, 200 million, and people are still sleeping in tents. So we need to lobby the government to make sure that giving money just to the big organizations, it takes forever to get down to the actual nitty-gritty of the people that actually need it on the ground. So we need to advocate for that, and I'm looking forward to working with Host and many other organizations so we can make a real difference in the people's lives, inshallah.
I hope so too. And I do agree with you 100% on this step.
Do you have any closing comments, Sister Nasiba?
The two things I really wanted to mention and emphasize on, it is important for the newly arrived members of our community, I wouldn't call them asylum seekers or refugees, for them to retain their religious values, their cultural values, to retain their mother languages, which is their wealth. And I strongly believe that they have to respect and value the culture of the host society. And I believe that these host societies can look at us with the wealth that we have brought with us. And we need to have one code towards each other, which is respect. And with that, we can live in harmony.
Jazakallah khairan, Sister Nasiba. Farouk, you have some closing comments?
Jazakallah khair, Sister Nasiba and Brother Ismail. We've lost Brother Asif. I do hope that short session that it was. I mean, for me personally, it sounds like we can speak about this for a long time, and one session doesn't do justice. So I do encourage everyone to get involved, find out more about what Host International does, see how you can participate in the work that Sister Nasiba, Host International, and NZF, apart from other organizations, are doing to be able to support refugees in Australia. I mean, just on a personal note, I have seen people who join our community, and they need the support. They need the support to be able to step up. So, thank you very much, Sister Nasiba. It was very insightful. And
Thank
Brother
you very
Ismail,
much. Thank
we look
you
forward
for
to working
providing
together,
me this
inshallah.
help. Thank you.
Just we have as part of National Zakah Foundation and the Zoom and sessions that we have, the sessions that we have in online sessions, continuing on from our successful sessions in Ramadan. We're looking at addressing sessions that nobody else talks about generally. So our next session is on Monday night at 8 p.m. and it's a live panel on men's health issues. So looking specifically from Brother Tariq Ahmed, who's the owner of EduGaid. And he's going to be discussing taking control over your mental health, looking out for a mate, and he's going to talk about his personal experience. So join us on Monday night for another session on very important topics and subjects that we need to start addressing to improve the general well-being of our entire community. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.